Hey everyone, welcome back to the New Mainstream Podcast. I'm your host, Mario Carrasco. Today's guest is Vera Chien, a research and strategy leader with deep experience across media, entertainment, and consumer insights. Vera has worked at the intersection of audience understanding, cultural trends, creative decision making, and future facing research. In this conversation, she's joining us in a personal and professional capacity. We're going to be discussing career journey, trends. So excited to have you on. Welcome to the New Mainstream.
Thanks so much, Mario. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So one of my favorite parts about the podcast is learning about how you got into insights. I think very rarely someone says that they knew they wanted to, but I think you're one of those rare people who knew early on that you were insighted in research. So how did you get into research?
Sure. The moment I came out of the womb, I was like, I was born to be a market researcher.
You were taking
No,
surveys, right?
yeah, really, totally. No, it really did start actually in college. Thankfully, it wasn't like that young ago, unlike other maybe careers. Really, it was born out of I majored in psychology. I think at the heart of it, psychology is about understanding people, why they do the things they do, why they think the way they think. And, for me, a natural progression of that, an extension of being able to continue to do that was in the world of research. And so in addition to understanding why people think the way they think and why they do the things they do, it's about why they buy the things they buy, why they watch the things they watch. And so for me, that's been probably the through line to today, where I still love understanding, why people, watch the things they do, why they watch things on streaming, why they watch things on YouTube, why they play the games they play. So all that to me is still, I'm really still very passionate about, because the beautiful thing I think of what we all do in the research community is, consumers change. People aren't static. And so it really requires, I think, understanding them at various stages in life, as they get older and evolve, as we all do. I think just keeping tabs on that, and especially with an eye towards looking towards the future and anticipating what their future needs are, their future preferences are, I think are important. So
Yeah,
that's
that's what one thing I've noticed, because now I've had hundreds of conversations with research professionals across all disciplines, and one thing I think that stands out about people that are passionate about the field is like that curiosity. You're rare in that you kind of knew and you're interested in psychology. I came from a literature background, which seems really left field, but if I think about it, yes, I loved writing and I loved reading, but what I was interested in is like learning about why characters did what they did, and it's
mm,
kind of the same thing, like
yeah,
and I think that's what's cool about our industry is, like, everybody's curious,
yeah,
and I think that's at the core of what fuels us, right? To keep on
yeah,
doing what we do because people evolve, like you said, not only do you have people in different life stages, now you have different generations, like, millennials were a big deal 10 years ago. Now we're all news and it's like Gen Z, and now Gen Z is kinda now we're, like, talking about Gen Alpha, and it's
oh
just
yeah.
always some AI, right?
Exactly. We're actually approaching, I think we're gonna start cutting off at some point Gen Alpha. Some people already believe it's already ended, and now we've somebody's gotta christen the next generation after Alpha, but we don't know exactly what's gonna be called, but we know, already they're gonna be AI native. Millennials, Gen Z are obviously digital native, but we are encountering and, new emerging generations that are coming of age in an AI environment, and
Yeah.
so I'm not joking when we'll probably see products that are going to be like an AI like baby crib, that's got like some fancy technology that
It
involves AI.
already exists, so I
Oh,
have
already
friends
exists. Okay, there we go. I'm already
already
late to the game.
yeah, and so we have friends that have, crib-aged children, and it,
Yeah.
like so it records their heartbeat and breathing patterns, and so it they learns when the baby's asleep or not, and then, like, when it goes off, the baseline, it automatically rocks the baby to put it back to
Okay.
sleep. It's
Amazing. There we go. There you
I'm
go.
like, can they make those for adults where like, rocks us to sleep a little bit?
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Yeah, maybe one of those like fancy mattress brands will get on that.
You know what? Probably on it. So what like is there like a particular project or moment that really was like, yeah, I'm gonna do market research for my career. Like,
Yeah, if I had to pinpoint, honestly, again, it was probably at my time, just as I was about to graduate from undergrad. And back in my day, at least, you weren't like on this like path of like internships galore and things like that, or at least for me, it wasn't. And so, graduating with a psychology degree, there's mainly kind of like two main paths. One involves kind of academia, so continuation of kind of research and writing up, dissertations and things like that. And then the other involves kind of hands-on therapy and all that kind of good stuff. Honestly, neither path really excited me. I think it was probably in the career center or something like that, where I saw this field called market research was another area that apparently people with a psychology background are suited for. I looked into it, and then I happened to land not long thereafter, essentially like an internship at Mattel Toys. And that really just like stuck. I mean, you're talking about a toy company, you're talking about talking to kids and like doing research with kids, and kids are obviously hilarious and they say their mind. And it's just, I know you're a parent, so you
yeah.
can imagine what it just, that was like, I was hooked. I think just coming off of that experience and then, obviously having wonderful mentors and colleagues in that environment, it was a very, at the time, like a very, I think, rigorous, and sort of coming from a more academic background type of culture there. And so I learned so much. It was such a great kind of formative experience. I ended up staying there for about 12 years and then ultimately kind of led insights for the flagship brands of Barbie and Hot Wheels. And so again, it was just such an amazing learning experience and on a category that of course is inherently fun and talking to audiences and consumers that are a lot of fun too. So it was really hard to go back and pivot to anything else. And I'd say since then, the bar is still quite high. From that, I ended up moving over to landing a role at Microsoft, talking to a similar audience and researching a similar audience. I led audience insights for Xbox. So again, fun and games and younger people and kids and this time younger adults, maybe. And then, yeah, coming back to LA, landing a role here at Warner Brothers Discovery. Our team's role is twofold. One is helping us identify kind of opportunities today. So ways to look at maybe underrepresented audiences or topics, or so quite a lot of foundational types of research, I'd say. And then the other part of what we do is looking at tomorrow. So what are those emerging audiences, emerging platforms, emerging technologies that we should be aware of and make sure that, we share that knowledge with the teams internally. So yeah,
Yeah, like you mentioned, underserved audiences and kind of thinking about um, what's next. AI and synthetic data now is everywhere. I think the promise there is that for researchers is that speed, efficiency, scale, being able to model faster, but there's also a lot of hype, and the industry's kind of figuring it out. When you look at it, like where we're at, current AI and synthetic data conversation, like what feels genuinely useful to you, if
yeah,
anything,
yeah.
and what feels like kind of overhyped.
Well, that is the $20,000 question, right? I think that the short answer is obviously we're all still figuring it out. What I will say is, having been in insights for, obviously a pretty long time, it's been amazing to see just the adoption of just AI tools and technologies in general within research. It is unlike anything I have experienced and so that has truly been impressive. A lot of it, I do feel like up until now has been in the area of efficiencies, especially workflow efficiencies, creating decks faster, analyzing data faster, cleaning data, all those kind of wonderful things.
Questionnaires.
Yeah. Creating questionnaires, discussion guides faster, things like that. And, obviously a ton of experimentation happening. So I think, all that's obviously wonderful. But at the same time, synthetic data, I view as kind of very separate sub area that really, again, based on kind of the research that I've been reading about other thought leaders, it just really hasn't, I think, proven itself. It's just not been as promising, and especially I think what has struck me about this is we're all excited about AI, and there's been certainly like an explosion of AI first startups or companies pivoting to AI. I think we all can name so many of those. But I think it also requires us as researchers, to have kind of a healthy vetting of gold rush, if you will, where just everything and anything is happening. And so I think again, I go back to kind of us as researchers and thinking about where I started my career and is rooted in the scientific method,
Uh,
of evaluating the null hypothesis. This is why we set up research. And yes, we are not experiment grade in what we are doing day in and day out, but let's apply those same principles to any new tool and approach that might come our way. And I think synthetic data should be no different. So net, research on research thus far, I don't think has been super promising on synthetic data. And so I think we're a little bit more cool on that. Are there corner cases where synthetic data could be useful? Probably. Just our team isn't, they aren't as relevant, I would say, to our team currently. I will say one thing I have kind of in terms of self-reflection on synthetic data and why there's all this hype about it is, as researchers, I want to think about like, what is this obsession? Just because I'm curious and I want to understand what is this obsession with like synthetic data. And I think for me, my observation is it comes back to obviously pressures around time and money. Obviously, typical market research, the complaint has always been, it takes a lot of time, it costs a lot of money, all that kind of stuff. And so that is totally valid and still continues to be valid. So the question I think maybe for us as researchers is how can we, those are pain points for our stakeholders or whoever's advocating for synthetic data. How can we do things faster, cheaper, but still maintain some level of rigor and quality that may not be necessary synthetic data because again, it's not proving itself out to be kind of that valuable right now. The other thing, kind of an observation I've had too is, maybe there's also, again, in the spirit of kind of self-reflecting and trying to unpack, like, why is this obsession, is maybe there's kind of dissatisfaction maybe. And I think we need to be open to this with the researchers themselves. Maybe not only is it time and money that is taking too long, but, maybe are we doing our best in terms of our insights, the quality of our insights, the quality of our recommendations. How are we doing as consultative partners to our stakeholders?
mm,
Those are soft skills that are difficult for AI in general to do, regardless of whether it's synthetic. And so, are we doing our best? Is there room for improvement? Because I like to think that if we were hitting it on firing on all cylinders on all of those areas, including being cheaper and faster, there may not be as much of a push for synthetic data, so
I agree with that. And I think you hit on something that as researchers, we're not as reflective as we should be on the why. And I think digging a little bit deeper into that, yeah, I think we can maybe improve the soft skills. But also part of it is the pressure as researchers we're putting on respondents. Sometimes we'll create these surveys to kind of cram everything that a client wants or that we need. And you end
yeah,
up taking a 30-minute survey. But let's be real, you've never taken a 30-minute survey. I never have.
yeah,
And yet we're telling respondents to do it, right? And so I think part of the pressure is like, uh, if we made it easier for them, they'd be taking surveys. It's a pretty good deal to take a survey and get an incentive.
Yeah.
We wouldn't need synthetic respondents, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. I'm guilty of all those things. You
Same,
know, the
same.
the 20, 30-minute survey. And so I think at least we are trying to get better in that area. A lot of that is will need to be in partnership with the vendors that we work with, of course, to help provide solutions to that. I think one area I'm particularly interested is in the user experience, the survey, especially if we're talking about quant, like the survey experience and making sure, first and foremost, like the language of it all, I say, let's try to be less clinical and more colloquial. That's my saying. I think in terms of language, like who in the world talks like, how likely or unlikely are you to do XYZ? Like who in the world talks like that in real life?
Right.
And so I think again, that's just one part of the puzzle of creating that better experience so that that respondents are more likely to answer. We're getting then more representation of people answering, all that kind of good stuff. So a lot of room to grow, but I do think there I've encountered already a few. We've been quite intentional about creating a better experience and delivering that through the survey platform. And so for me, especially as coming from my background in doing a lot of research with kids where like 5-point Likert scale is literally not going to be able to work with like a 4-year-old, right? 5-year
Right.
old. And so you come up with things like you simplify the language. You also, happy face scale, a 3-point happy face scale instead of a 5-point, Likert scale. You do all these things. And so I think that again was part of my kind of learning experience, at the start of my career. And so I've really, really just carried that through because honestly, the same best practices that apply to optimizing research, especially quant for a 7, 8-year-old, literally applies to adult respondents today because the average reading age for sadly Americans is about third grade level.
I had no idea. Well, I did have an idea. I didn't realize it was that low. And I mean, it's a
Yeah.
sad statistic, but I
Yeah.
think that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind as
No.
researchers
And to
because
make it fun, again, another thing I'm super passionate about is like showing stimuli, showing logos, doing things to visually not make it look like like you're answering your like health information for at a doctor's office,
and that's so
and
helpful too with the mobile experience because
oh my gosh.
um,
Yeah.
you read these huge grids, it's impossible to do on a phone. Like
Yeah.
the more
Yeah.
pictures and visual you can be, the easier it's gonna be shown to you on a mobile device, which is where the majority of respondents nowadays are taking surveys.
Exactly. Exactly. Especially younger audiences. I really do wish there was like kind of like an industry like coalition that got together to answer because at the end of the day we all know that these things do matter. They will end up showing up in greater respondent rates, representation, quality of data, of course, because by the end of a 30-minute, like honestly like super clinical sounding survey, I mean, the only people who are answering that are the ones that want to get that 50-cent Amazon Prime credit, whatever.
Right, right, right. Now,
So
I will plug there is an initiative I worked on when I was on the board of SampleCon called
mm,
Global Data Quality Initiative, GDQ. So I'll plug that and
oh,
I'll send
I'll
that to
look into
you.
that.
Yeah, it's kind of touches on all this of, how do we as researchers put together some best practices for data quality. And
A lot of room for improvement still, I think.
one of the angles I wanted to talk about too, kind of talking about the data experience and I think we share the same questions about synthetic and how quickly it's being pushed, but we are also dabbling in it, right? We have to as the industry goes on.
Sure.
But one of the questions we grapple with as a company is like, yes, synthetic is promising, but yet we don't have a handle on representation. Like we're still underrepresenting Latino audiences in sample, Black audiences,
Yeah.
Asian audiences. And it's
Yeah.
like, why are we putting so much pressure there when we're not getting our sample frames right? You did mention underserved audiences. Like, how do you think about that? How are you making sure that your sample is getting those audiences? And I think that are particularly important in the entertainment industry, right?
First and foremost, it depends on the objective, right? And so I would say much of the time we tend to rely on natural fallout of
Mhm.
audiences, and we hope, fingers crossed, there it is generally representative of the at least the online population. And again, we already talked about trying to make that user experience more friendly to a broader group of people that are will make them, at least not leave the survey and kind of drop out. We also at the same time then know that that's not enough. And so we historically have done quite a bit of research deep diving into specific audiences. That is part of our team's kind of purview. And so whether they are based on a specific kind of demographic or a different kind of mindset, it is something that, we do to append or augment kind of the existing knowledge about, whether it's about, consumers' entertainment needs and what have you. We also, though, if we want to get real tactical, even in these more general kind of surveys, we do have minimum quotas on different subgroups, especially subgroups of interest. And race and ethnicity obviously is going to be a big one, especially since, if we're talking about younger audiences, essentially they are, new babies being born. About half of new babies being born are multicultural.
Yeah.
Those quotas are obviously we revisit those every so often to make sure they are in line with what, either it's census or other sort of mega data sets are finding
Yeah.
about the general US population, and making sure that we generally have sampled according to that. And then for cases where we want to deep dive, then we might just look at LGBTQ specifically, or we might look at, Asian Americans, what have you, and deep dive into their entertainment habits and whatnot.
And you touch on, entertainment. Kind of the conversation we had before the podcast that I really enjoyed was how different entertainment research is, right? You're not Well, your time at Mattel, like, you're not selling a toy or a product that you're optimizing the packaging or the price. You're dealing with story, emotion. How has that shift been for you? How is entertainment research, like, different than traditional consumer research? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you've been in both.
Yeah. No, and again, I'm so grateful for that first experience at Mattel because it does straddle. I mean, unlike, let's say yogurt or like, I don't know, deodorant or anything like that. Nothing wrong with those categories, of course, but they have a long history of very structured kind of research programs at, your classic, what is it, FCMG, well, whatever it's called today,
Yeah.
CPG companies basically. And so, toys are we're all, yes, consumer packaged good, but a far slower moving and more durable good at that. And it does already have like story and brand kind of built in, I would say, into the product. But for me, the real segue was to go from that to video games. And so video
Mm,
games and I would say TV shows and movies, entertainment, have a lot in common. There, of course, are things we research, and otherwise I wouldn't, they wouldn't have a research team. But I think what those two experiences really kind of solidified for me was that these types of entertainment media mediums are art forms at the end of the day. So, you have a poster behind you that's like inspired by Shepard Fairey. Nobody is researching and telling Shepard Fairey like what, poster to create, right? And nor are
right.
we doing that for the movies, the TV show specifically, or even video games. What is within, I think, the bounds of is doing either more front end kind of foundational or inspirational research that then hopefully will inspire our content creators, producers, story writers, things like that, of what might be some either topics or ways to think about it. And it's really for me more about like immersion than
Mm,
immersing them in a target audience of theirs. So let's say the animation team is always looking at younger audiences. And so making sure we are presenting latest, greatest information around Gen Alpha, perhaps, maybe Gen Z, and just as a whole. So they start developing like a gut intuition for what those consumers are like. And so hopefully my hope is are those things start showing up in some magical way in a final like 30-minute episode of, a new animated series. It's not going to have a
Interesting.
direct connection.
Yeah.
That's my hope. And then of course there's still marketing insights and marketing of the marketing assets. So, testing a trailer, testing a package, testing a poster, testing, all those things are still very much part of the process for not necessarily our team, but other teams here are still doing very much of those. But I think our team specifically, because we are supporting more at the corporate level, is looking at things with a longer horizon perhaps, and a more like higher altitude of insights to hopefully again, um, give bring consumers closer to people who are developing content for them.
I think you hit on this a little bit, but I want to ask more directly. Like,
Yeah,
you gave us some really good tools, I think, for the researchers listening from your time at Mattel, what to apply in research in general, right?
yeah.
Like, we can all simplify our language, use more images, make their surveys more interesting. I think that applies to all research. What can researchers learn from entertainment industry research that we can apply across industries, in your opinion, now that you've been in entertainment research?
First and foremost, having this maybe healthy respect that you cannot, uh, and maybe should not you cannot research the product itself. I think just acknowledging that it's like
Mm,
unlike a deodorant or a diaper or something like that, you cannot optimize. Yeah, yes, you can actually go through the motions of doing the research, but will Christopher Nolan listen to you, or will Steven Spielberg listen to you? Probably not.
yeah.
Because you got to place the trust in these artists that will do the storytelling. And so I think first acknowledging that, but do not be discouraged. Like I said, there are other, I think thinking of ways to I almost like immerse and educate. So again, maybe looking at things quite broad of an audience. So let's say if there is and trying to anticipate, I think being maybe a little bit bringing in like a bit of foresight into one's like toolkit, especially could be helpful. And I'm speaking specifically for my team's role. We absolutely have teams that are more tied in to the development of a TV show or a movie, and they have similar techniques, but they may get asked other kind of questions around like a certain genre. So again, those are examples of maybe the kind of research that we would do in lieu of research on the actual like TV show or movie, and like optimizing the hell out of it. It would be things like, okay, this team is considering doing a horror, kind of TV show. What do we know about horror TV shows in the past? What's done well? What's not done well? Are there any kind of magic must-haves or ingredients? And again, so maybe more front end kind of
Mm.
research. Hopefully those things will yield more payoff than, you know, which is the inability to actually do research on the show or the movie itself. Not to say that those things don't happen, but again, it's I think as researchers, it's trying to understand who your internal audience is and maybe where the gaps are and what is the receptivity to the different types of research, I'd say.
Yeah, and what's good about that advice is that when you get a little bit higher level front end, it's applicable to multiple products.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And so I think that's what, and you
yeah,
mentioned Christopher Nolan. I'm a big movie fan, huge Christopher Nolan fan.
yeah.
I would like to think maybe he did listen to some research because, the Odyssey is coming out, right?
Man, this week, I'm super excited.
This week, yeah. And so again, a huge Christopher Nolan fan, watched all his films, but he's been criticized, right, about not having a diverse cast, it being male heavy.
Yeah,
I would like to think he saw some research or listened because extremely diverse cast,
Yeah.
lots of strong female leads in the Odyssey, and it's going to be likely break all the records. So there's hope. Like, you mentioned he's
I
not, he had to have
Yeah.
seen something.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's been really cool to see that.
I don't know. That was such a great observation. I hope. I mean, it would be awesome. I also think these things happen maybe more organically. Maybe it's in response to the criticism. Like he was like, "Oh yeah, I didn't really think about that." I'm not going to put words in
Exactly.
his mouth. I'm not precious about if it came from research. Wonderful. If it came from other sources, again,
Sure.
ultimately, the end result is amazing. And so whoever was responsible or whatever was responsible, or maybe he just had epiphany, who knows? Maybe it's all of those things. However it happened, I think for us, just taking that and making that very example concrete, and Odyssey is not our one of our movies, but one of the types of research we would do is we would deep dive around underrepresented audiences and at least make sure the internal teams, of which Christopher Nolan is not, might understand at least, what are some of the unique needs of each audience and why is the representation important to see on screen, and making sure we share those insights internally. So then us, these creators, developers, showrunners, what have you, and writers are thinking about and writing new content, it's somehow, again, immersed in their gut intuition somehow. They may not ever remember Vera, her research or whatever, but maybe it might just like, again, be somewhere in their noggin. And
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I do want to talk about something you alluded to. AI is changing the way we do research like so rapidly, where you mentioned where presentations and questionnaires and generating, like, imagine the next 2 3 years that's going to get even better. I'm sure you've thought about this. Like, where does this leave us as researchers? How do you see the future of insights professionals that changing? How do you see our roles changing and evolving? Who are we once
Yeah.
AI can do all this stuff so quickly?
Yeah. Well, we're human, so that's awesome.
Yes, yes.
I do think even in 2, 3 years, humans will still need to be in the loop. I think, again, it's about soft skills, the skills that it's really
Mm,
difficult for AI to do. Like, I mean, it can do a lot of stuff fast. We still need humans to check the work. And so there are teams in other disciplines where they're actually, for now, hiring more people because,
mm,
yes, AI allows you to output stuff faster, a lot of stuff faster, but especially in important cases, you really need humans to check stuff because there's still a lot of stuff. I mean, we've already seen bloopers from like REI or whatever things. It was like a bike or something that had like, two sets of handlebars that didn't make sense, that they were selling. So I still think in the next 2 or 3 years, there will still need to be, at least people checking. And still, I mean, I think in 2, 3 years, researchers will still need to be absolutely in the loop. But at the same time, it's, all those soft skills, consulting, like taking the insights from, let's say, a report, and then making sure the teams, you're there to answer questions, advocating for the implications, workshopping them, doing kind of brainstorming sessions. Those are things that I think AI is. I don't know. I haven't seen a tool yet that will help automate all that stuff, and it's more of a synchronous dialogue with other humans,
mm.
hopefully, in that
Yeah.
process. And so, I think especially in a world where a lot of AI is kind of smashing things to the mean, things that are going to provide competitive advantage are going to be the humans, are going to be the human-led ideas, whether they come from insights or just come from other functions. I think I still add a lot of value to organizations. I mean, who knows? I might be eating my words in 2 to 3 years, but I think it's taking and harnessing the information and driving kind of action with it. We can certainly try to automate that in a more structured manner, but I just don't know how that really will happen in a AI led or AI dominant kind of way.
I love the quote you said about how AI is smashing everything to the mean. It's so true. I like your optimistic take. Like, as a business owner, right, I'm always seeing the bad stuff,
Yeah,
and trying to, how do we manage this, right?
yeah,
These pressures on our business. But you're right. I think one thing that differentiates us is like we have a point of view.
yes,
Because if you ask AI, again, it's going to go to the mean. It's not necessarily seeing trends, what kids like, what people are interested, what's
no,
emerging.
no,
It's smashing
yeah.
everything to the mean.
Yeah, and I've done or it's stating the obvious. So, like, of course, everybody's now using AI to, like, interpret open ends, summarize it. I'm still like and that's like a pretty rudimentary AI skill, frankly.
Right.
It's still honestly for me so dissatisfying because it just says like things like, "Oh, this movie was great because it was really like the setting was great," or like just very rudimentary kind of themes. And, if you dig into it, there's so much more nuance that it's just not will it get better? I hope so. I hope these AI tools will get better, but that's just one example. And even just playing around with, like, AI summary of data, it does, I think, a really good job at a really super blunt level. Like, if you were, like, I don't know, just needed to get, like, an elevator, pitch summary of something. Yeah, I think it does a decent job, but to really get in and understand the nuance is just not something currently or either that or I'm not prompting it in the right way to look for those things. It's just not for me been those
But no,
nuance
you gave a
nuggets.
really great example about the open ends because, in an ideal world, a client does qual,
Mhm,
whether that's a focus group or just some like open end questions and then the quant.
mhm,
Some of our best work as researchers has been we find that one open end where you're like, oh, that's so interesting. We didn't think about that in the product.
yep,
And you follow up and it ends up being something they build a whole marketing campaign. And
I
AI
know,
is not going to catch that one interesting
no,
one. Only a researcher that can kind of read through and
no,
say, whoa,
no,
this is
correct.
interesting.
Correct. Yeah, and so I completely understand the pressures a typical researcher has today around time and cost and everything, but I do think we are like if everybody's using more or less the same 3 or 4 or tools rooted on the same 3 or 4 large language models, you're all going to have very
Mm.
similar themes because 'cause they're all trained the same way. And so how the only then difference if you're a P&G versus deodorant company A versus B or C, you're not going to have any differences. And so where the difference lies is in perhaps those nuggets that somebody, the human in the loop hopefully can pick out. And maybe there's something there. And sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And so my team is a little bit different in terms of we don't have some of these pressures that other teams do. And so we do have time to look for those nuggets. And I don't know what the solution is, but I mean, there's some things here and there in terms of the prompting that can help, but still generally not thrilled with like just the smashing down into and making everything force fit into these neat 5, 6 themes, that AI likes to do. So
Yeah. Thank you. There's a great optimistic note to end on. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for coming on.
yes.
If people want to follow you, kind of learn more about your work, what's the best way to connect with you online?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn, Vera Chien, and yeah, happy to chat further. I love nerding out on this stuff. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, Vera, and thank you everybody for listening.